Hi, this is Bamsak Oh from Gyeongsang National University, South Korea. The title of my paper is Grassmann Clustering for Multiple Time Series. This work is co-worked with Professor Andrew Bengjin-Teo, Yonsei University of South Korea, and Professor Sunjin Yu, Changwon National University of South Korea. The presentation consists of four parts. Firstly, I will introduce about the background, motivation, and contribution of our work. And then we'll introduce about Grassmann multivariate time series clustering. Actually, what we propose in this one is grouping the realization of MTS clustering into three umbrella approaches. First one is intrinsic approach, second one is extrinsic approach, and the last one is semi-intrinsic approach. We will provide the experimental result using multiple time series derived from human gesture database. And then we will conclude the presentation today. Multiple time series, which is also shortened as MTS, is a time series with more than one data point at a time. We use p-dimensional here, and p can be any number for multiple time series. For example, in this plots, we can see that at the time we have p number of data points, so it forms a vector, and by stacking the vector over time, we have the MTS as a matrix in this format. So P is the number of data points at a time, and N is the number of data time points. We can see here that univariate time series, which is having only one component at a time, is a special case of MTS. Clustering UTS, univariate time series, is widely researched in the community because there is many existing technology for similarity or dissimilarity measurement which can be applied to vector space. And then we also have many well-developed clustering techniques which can be applied to vector space data points. However, MTS is different from UTS. The first thing is that the MTS no longer lie on a vector space. As we have seen in the previous page, MTS is a form of matrix. Moreover, MTS has two special properties. First one is joint temporal dynamics, and second one is correlation. Different from UTS, we have to have considered these two components to be accounted in the methodology development. So up to recent research experiment, we have a general way to cluster MTS, which is using the state space dynamical model, for example, the ARMA model. And the ARMA model is converted into orthonormal matrix to form of a linear subspace. And special distance measurement is then applied to this linear space data points. And then finally clustering is applied to this special similarity or dissimilarity measurement. However, we can easily understand that using those conventional approach of MTS clustering, it is not enough to be general. First thing is that due to its linear subspace structure of ARMA model, it cannot have applied on the general purpose of clustering algorithm developed for vector space data points. For example, we cannot compute the mean of k mean of the k-means algorithm, it is not clear at all because the number of data time points is different over data samples. However, we can observe that the MTS can be considered as a special data point on a Grassmann manifold. For example, the linear subspace can be treated as a point on a Grassmann manifold. So we can apply the existing clustering method and similarity or dissimilarity measurement on the Grassmann manifold. Then we can use the existing clustering algorithms for clustering the data, MTS data. In this paper, what we have done is to streamline the realization of Grassmann MTS clustering techniques into three umbrella approaches. First one is intrinsic Grassmann clustering. Second one is extrinsic Grassmann clustering. The last one is semi-intrinsic Grassmann clustering. We will introduce how we categorize the Grassmann clustering techniques into these three approaches in the following pages. Before we introduce about the three umbrella approaches, we will talk about the Grassmann manifold briefly. The mathematical definition of Grassmann manifold is like this. Actually, the Grassmann manifold is this figure showing the properties of Grassmann manifold. It exhibits the nonlinear structure. For example, the manifold is nonlinear, and the linear subspace can be treated as a point on the Grassmann manifold. So we are using these properties to do the time series clustering by treating the MTS data as a point on the Grassmann manifold. Let's see this the figure on the left hand of the screen showing the upper part of the Grassmann clustering manifold, Grassmann MTS clustering techniques. Let's say we have n number of multivariate time series, and each of the time series is converted into a LDS model by using this equation. And this observability matrix is then computed using these two parameters C and A. C and A is compacted in this format. Then we have to also normalize the O matrix, which is represented in UM. UM means a linear subspace like this. As we have mentioned in the previous pages, each linear subspace can be treated as a point on a Grassmann manifold. So the lower part of this plot shows structural properties of Grassmann manifold. Each subspace corresponds to data points on a Grassmann manifold. So how we do clustering on this Grassmann manifold? We can have three types: intrinsic, extrinsic, and semi-intrinsic. Firstly, we will introduce about the intrinsic Grassmann manifold clustering technique. What we have in mind to define this clustering approach is that all the clustering can be done within the manifold only. So the key idea here is to do computing the proper similarity or dissimilarity on the Grassmann manifold using geodesic distance. Geodesic distance means that in this figure, since the structure is nonlinear, we need to have to consider the nonlinear property of Grassmann manifold. We cannot directly compute the Euclidean distance, which doesn't mean actual distance between two data points on Grassmann manifold. We can use principal angle or pro-close-to distance as a similarity or dissimilarity measurement, which can be defined by these two equations. Then we can apply k-means and spectral, two types of clustering algorithms. The second one, extrinsic Grassmann clustering, can be consist of two parts. The first category is tangent spaces. What tangent space means that we can define a plane as shown in this figure, and this figure is tangent space of the Grassmann manifold at the point U. And based on this plane, tangent space, we can project the data point on Grassmann manifold up to this plane based on this center point of U. So the mapping between the Grassmann manifold and tangent space can be done by this equation, exponential and turning back to the Grassmann manifold is a log function. So by defining the points Grassmann manifold on this tangent space, we then can apply any clustering algorithm on this tangent space, which means that existing clustering technique can be applied even for multivariate time series data. This is the first one. So we use the expression we have flattened Grassmann manifold into a tangent space. Another approach of this extrinsic Grassmann clustering is to project the data by using a projection kernel, which can be defined in this manner. The last category, semi-intrinsic Grassmann clustering, is a kind of hybrid approach in between intrinsic and extrinsic. The reason why we use this expression is that we can perform the clustering within the manifold. So it is a kind of property of intrinsic approach. The second one is that to do the computation of mean, we cannot use just sample mean for MTS. We have to use the culture mean, which is a special way of computing the mean of linear subspaces. So this technique is kind of extrinsic approach. So we are using the culture mean, which has extrinsic property, and we are doing the clustering within the manifold. So it is by using both properties of intrinsic and extrinsic. That is why we named the third category as a semi-intrinsic. This pseudocode shows the way how we compute the culture mean. So this table shows our proposed three categories along with the types of data clustering algorithm and similarity, dissimilarity measurement, and how we use the graph, how we construct the graph. So according to the number of methods, actually we define 4 methods for intrinsic and 4 methods for extrinsic and 3 methods for semi-intrinsic. So in total, we have proposed 11 Grassmann MTS clustering. All the 11 methods is not proposed by us. About 8 to 9 is existing one, and the newly proposed in this work is 2 to 3. The dataset we have used in this experiment is motion capture dataset proposed, generated, and released by CMU. And among the all datasets, we selected 9 gestures, which consists of 216 samples. And we consider only C3D format, which consists of uh, 62 angular features of skeletal movement. And we use the first 120 frames. This shows the specific details of the data we have used in this experiment study. This shows the experimental result in terms of accuracy, and we have considered the linear dynamic system, LDS and CLDS. This C means the complex value, which means that this doesn't have anything, so it is a real valued one. By having the intrinsic only, we have grouped the result here and here, and extrinsic using the corner property, and extrinsic using the tangent space technique, and the last one is semi-intrinsic. So by looking at only the real value data, we can see that the best performance has been obtained by this combination, Procurtus distance and K-means algorithm. And using the complex valued one, the best accuracy has been obtained by this approach, embedded using the projection kernel. And by comparing these two groups of the result, we can see that using complex valued one generally produce better accuracy than the of using real valued one. Here we need to consider that the previous one in here, the best performing algorithm, in terms of the computing cost, it takes the most computational power, even about 300 times than the fastest one. And in terms of the time consuming, using real valued one or complex valued one, it doesn't make big difference. So what we can conclude from here is that using complex one is better option, and this corner embedding takes about 60 seconds, but it has shown about 10% better result than the other approaches. And if we have to compensate the accuracy as well as the computation cost, we also can consider about these approaches, which take less time but produce a bit lower accuracy than the projection kernel embedding method. So let's summarize the experimental result and our observation. We have proposed 3 categories of MTS clustering method, and each of the method has merit or demerit. So we have to consider the problem what we have at hand. If the problem is require high speed, we can consider of corner embedding, which can give fast and reasonably good performance. But it has the disadvantage also, it is inflexible at all. So we need to consider these components when we design the clustering algorithm. So let's conclude the presentation. We have streamlined 3 umbrella approaches: intrinsic, semi-intrinsic, and extrinsic. And according to the combination of the algorithms utilized, we have derived 11 algorithms. and we also shown that the merits and demerits and characteristics of each category along way. That's all for my presentation today. Thank you.